Chapter 11. Jill slid to a stop at the City Hall gate, both gems held tightly in one sweaty hand. The area was clear, at least as far as she could see, but the restaurant had been empty, the Nemesis gone, and that meant she needed to hurry. She didn't know how, but it was tracking her, and she wanted to get gone. Her blurred dash through the alleyways behind the restaurant had left her short of breath and not a little frightened. She'd nearly tripped over the body of some unlikely creature, one she'd been unable to see in the deepening blackness. But the dark silhouette of multiple claws hanging dead in the shadows had been more than enough to keep her moving. It didn't look like anything she'd seen before. That, and the threat of the Nemesis's inevitable pursuit, had her in a mild panic. She used it to lend speed to her efforts, careful to maintain tight control. She knew from experience that keeping in touch with one's animal instincts was a vital part of survival. A little fear was a good thing. It kept the adrenaline flowing. The ornamental clock was set into a raised die next to the gate. She fumbled the blue jewel into place, the diamond-shaped glass setting off a faint electrical hum, a circular chain of lights that bordered the jewels flickering on. The green diamond went in just as easily, turning the light chain into a complete circle. There was a heavy grinding sound, and the gate's two sets of doors slid open, revealing a shadowy path surrounded by overgrown hedges. It didn't look bad from where she stood. She eased into the silent walk, opening her senses. Cool, dark, a mild breeze promising rain, the only thing that moved, rustling the trees, brushing leaves, chilling the sweat on her face and arms. She could hear the soft wailing of a distant virus zombie drift through the air, and she saw the pale smudges of early moonlight on the path stones. Alert, but sensing no immediate danger, she stepped further inside, her thoughts turning to Carlos Oliveira. He was telling the truth about being one of Umbrella's hired hands, and probably about not knowing what the company was really up to, but he was also holding something back. He wasn't as good a liar as he thought, and his apparent willingness to lie didn't bode well. On the other hand, he didn't come across as devious in any way. A liar who meant well, perhaps, or at least who didn't mean any harm. He was probably just being careful, doing exactly what she was doing. Whatever the case, she didn't have time to do any major interpreting, so she was going with her first impression. He was one of the good guys. Whether or not that would be of any help to her was another story. For the moment, she was willing to settle for any ally who didn't have plans to kill her. But should I be hooking up with anyone? What happens if he gets in the way of the Nemesis and... As if on cue, she heard it. A malevolent coincidence that seemed unreal, like some deadly joke. Stars! Speak of the devil. Oh shit, where is it? Jill was almost at the center of a small park where three trails intersected, and the sound came from somewhere ahead. Or was it behind? The acoustics were strange, the tiny courtyard just in front of her making a low, hissing cry seemed to come from everywhere. She spun, searching, but the path behind her and the two that stretched away from the open yard disappeared into shadow. Which way? She stepped lightly into the open space, giving herself greater access to escape and room to maneuver, if it came to that. A solid, heavy footstep. Another. Jill cocked her head. And there, ahead and to the left, the path that led to the trolley. A thickening darkness, still just clear out of sight. Go back. Newspaper office, or back to the station. No way I can outrun it, but there's the gas station. It has a metal lockdown shutter, and there's a shitload of cars, the better to hide. Ahead and to the right, a simple plan was better than none, and she'd run out of time to consider her options any further. Jill took off, the light patter of her boots lost beneath a sudden clash of motion, the rising howl and dense tread of semi-synthetic feet bearing down on the courtyard. She was deeply conscious of herself, her muscles contracting, of the sounds of her heart and breath as she flew over the stones. In an instant, she was at the small gate that led further north, that would take her down a block packed with abandoned cars, past a gas station repair shop, toward... She couldn't remember. If the street was clear, she could head through the industrial section of town, hope that she didn't run into any of the zombie packs. If blockades had been put up. then I'm screwed. And it's too late anyway. She let her well-trained body do the rest of her thinking, nimbly slipping through the gate and into a crouching run, carrying her into the relative safety of a maze of gridlocked cars and trucks. She could feel it coming, and she allowed herself to flow into the shadows, to find in herself some primal understanding of her place in the hunt. She was the prey. She had to be as elusive as the Nemesis was determined. If she did it right, she would survive, and the creature would go hungry. If not, no time, no more thinking. The Nemesis was coming. Jill moved. In the parking garage's office, Carlos found a half case of bottled water, some duct tape, and a men's dress shirt still in its package, as close to sterile supplies as they were going to get. He immediately set to doing what he could for Mikhail, while Nikolai kept watch, staring out at the broken automobiles in the dark, rifle in hand. The courtyard was silent except for Mikhail's harsh breathing and the lonely cry of a distant crow. Carlos didn't know much beyond simple triage, but he thought the wound wasn't too bad. The bullet had gone clean through Mikhail's side, not far above his left hip bone. An inch or two closer in and he would have been toast. A shot to the liver or kidneys is death warrant. As it was, his lower intestine had probably been pierced. It would kill him eventually, but with prompt medical attention, he should be okay for now. Carlos cleaned and dressed the wound, taping compresses on, wrapping strips of the shirt around Mikhail's torso to keep the pressure up. The platoon leader seemed to be managing the pain well enough, though he was nauseous and dizzy from loss of blood. Out of the corner of his eye, Carlos noticed that Nikolai was moving. He finished layering tape over the bandages and looked up, saw that the squad leader had taken a laptop computer out of his shoulder bag and was tapping at keys, his face a study in concentration. He'd slung his rifle and was crouched next to a smashed pickup truck. "Sir, Nikolai, I'm done here," Carlos said, standing. Mikhail had insisted that they drop the formalities of rank, pointing out that their situation demanded flexibility. Carlos had agreed, though he hadn't gotten the impression that Nikolai liked it much. He seemed to be a by-the-book type. Mikhail, pale and bleary-eyed, pushed himself up on his elbows. "Anyway, you can use that thing to call for evac." His voice was weak. Nikolai shook his head, sighing. He closed the laptop and returned it to his bag. "I found it at the police station and thought it might be of some use. Lists of blockheads, perhaps, or more information about this disaster." "No luck?" Mikhail asked. Nikolai moved toward them, his expression resigned. "No. I think our best option is to try and make it to the clock tower." Carlos frowned. Trent had told him there was supposed to be a supply of weapons at the clock tower, and that he should head north from there. Between Jill's westbound cable car and this new information, he was starting to feel plagued by coincidences. "Why the clock tower?" Mikhail answered, speaking softly. "Evacuation. It's where we were supposed to take the civilians and signal the transports to come in. The clock tower bells are scheduled to toll by computer, a system that emits a beacon signal when the program is being used. We ring the bells, the copters come. Cute, huh?" Carlos wondered why no one had bothered to include that little nugget of information in their briefing, but decided not to ask. It didn't really matter at this point. They had to get to the trolley. He didn't know Nikolai well, but Mikhail Victor was no threat, not in his condition, and he needed to get to a hospital. Trent had said there was one not far from the clock tower. But Umbrella's eyes and ears... No. Their stories were the same as his. They'd fought and watched their teammates die, gotten lost, looked for a way out and ended up here. It just felt weird suddenly having two more people involved. Trent had him questioning everyone's motives now, wondering who might be involved in the alleged Umbrella conspiracy, wondering about what he could and couldn't say. Besides, Umbrella screwed them over too. Why would they want to help the bastards who landed us in this shit? Trent may be telling the truth, but he's not here. They are, and I need them. We need them. Jill couldn't possibly object to having a few soldiers on her side. "There's a cable car we can use to get out of here," Carlos said. "Right to the clock tower, I think. It's close. It runs west, and with all those things out there looking for fresh meat. We could use a ride out of town, Nikolai broke in, nodding. Assuming the tracks are clear. Wonderful. Are you sure it's in operating condition? Carlos hesitated, then shrugged. I haven't actually seen it. I ran into a cop, I guess. A woman. She told me about it. She was on her way there, to see. She said she'd wait for me. I wanted to see if I could find anyone before we left. He felt almost guilty telling them about her, and he abruptly realized that he was letting all of Trent's crazy spy crap get to him. Why keep Jill a secret? Who cared? Mikhail and Nikolai exchanged a look, and then both nodded. Carlos was glad. At last, a real plan, a course of action. The only thing worse than being in deep shit was being in deep shit with no direction. Let's go, Nikolai said. Mikhail, are you ready? Mikhail nodded, and together, Carlos and Nikolai lifted him, supporting his weight as evenly as they could. They edged into the parking garage and had almost made it back to the office when Nikolai let out a mild curse and stopped. What? Mikhail closed his eyes, breathing deeply. The explosives, Nikolai said. I can't believe I forgot why I even came back this way. After I found Mikhail, I just... Explosives? Carlos asked. Yes. Just after the zombies attacked, and my squad. Nikolai swallowed, obviously struggling to maintain his composure. After the zombies attacked, I ended up near a construction site, back in the industrial area. A building was being torn down, I think, and I saw a few discarded boxes with high explosive warnings. There was a locked trailer. I was going to break in, but another wave of them came after me. He met Carlos's gaze squarely. They'd think twice about attacking in groups if we had a few RDX dynamite mixes to throw at them. Do you think you can make it to the trolley without me? I can meet you there. I don't think we should split up, Mikhail said. We stand a better chance if we have a way to keep them from getting too close, Nikolai interjected. We can't afford to run out of ammo, not without something else to back us up. And there are the others to consider, the creatures. Carlos didn't think that splitting up was such a good idea either, but remembering that clawed thing from outside the restaurant. And what about that big Theon inside the restaurant? Jill said it would be coming after her again. Yeah, okay, Carlos said. We'll wait for you at the cable car. Good. I won't be long. Without another word, Nikolai turned and quickly walked away, out of the garage and into the night. Carlos and the pale Mikhail struggled on in silence. They'd gone back through the office and out into the street before Carlos realized that Nikolai hadn't bothered asking for directions to the trolley. Nikolai had to resist a powerful urge to check the computer again as soon as he was out of sight. He had wasted enough time playing the upstanding squad leader to the two idiot soldiers. It had already been 19 minutes since Captain Davis Chan had filed a watchdog status report from the Umbrella Medical Sales Office, about 2 blocks from the parking garage. And if Nikolai was very lucky, he might catch Chan still in the act, checking updated memos or trying to get through to one of the administrators. Nikolai jogged down a narrow alley plastered with flyers, hopping over several corpses strewn throughout, careful to avoid their upper bodies in case they weren't dead. Sure enough, one of the blasted things near the end of the alley tried to reach around and grab his left boot. Nikolai jumped it with no trouble, smiling a little at its frustrated moan. Almost as pathetic as Mikhail. Carlos Oliveira, though. Tougher than he looked, and definitely brighter. No match for him, of course, but Nikolai would want to get rid of him sooner rather than later. Or not. I could bypass that charade entirely. Nikolai pushed through a metal door to his right, into another alley littered with human remains, considering his options as he hurried along. He didn't need to go to the clock tower for any reason, just a hospital, and he didn't have to take the trolley. Toying with Mikhail, and now Carlos was enjoyable, but not a necessity. He could even let them live if he chose. He grinned, turning a corner in the winding alleyway. What fun would that be? No. He was looking forward to watching the trust in their eyes crumble, seeing them realize how stupid they'd been. Nikolai froze, understanding the sound instantly. Claws on rock, Ahead of him, the almost gentle clatter coming from the shadows above and to the left. The only available light was behind him in the walkway's corner, one of those buzzing fluorescent security lamps that barely had the power to show itself. He backed toward it, the ticks coming faster and closer, the creature still unseen. "Show yourself then," he growled, frustrated with yet another instance of bad timing. He had to get to the sales office before Chan disappeared. He didn't have time to battle one of Umbrella's freaks, much as he wanted to. Two of them. He could hear claws scratching cement to his right, where he'd just been, even as an unholy shriek sounded from the dark in front of him, a sound like madness, like souls being ripped apart. And there it was, screaming, leaping from the dark as the other joined in its monstrous song, moving black hell in stereo. Nikolai saw the raised hooked claws on the one in front of him, the snapping, dripping mandibles, the gleaming insectile eyes, and knew that the other was only a second behind its sibling, preparing to jump even as the first landed. Nikolai opened up, the rattle of automatic fire lost beneath the twinned howls, the rounds finding their mark on the first, its scream changing as it shuddered to a stop, barely 3 meters away. And, still firing, Nikolai crouched and fell backwards, rolling up on his right side in a single, fluid motion. The second charging animal was less than 2 meters away when he hit it, bloody davits appearing in its shiny black exoskeleton like flowers in bloom. Like the first, it twitched and spasmed to a halt before collapsing, its shrill cry becoming a gurgle, becoming silence. Nikolai got to his feet, unnerved, not sure of the species. Either brainsucker or the more amphibious demos, another multi-legged breed. He expected the viciousness and the attack method, but he hadn't understood how fast they were. If I'd been even a second later. No time to consider it. He was in a hurry. He edged forward, quickly stepping over the dark, oozing sprawl of limbs, breaking into a run as soon as he was past. With each step away from the dead creatures, he felt his composure returning, felt a flush of accomplishment warm him from the inside out. They were fast, but he was faster, and with such monsters loose in the city, he wouldn't have to worry about Mikhail or Carlos or anyone escaping what they were due. If he didn't get to enjoy the pleasure himself, he could revel in the knowledge that his comrades would certainly fall prey to any one of a dozen horrors, their inadequate reflexes failing them, their lack of skills ensuring their doom. Nikolai tightened his grip on the M16, a rush of elation adding spring to each agile step. Raccoon was no place for the weak. He had nothing to fear.